Hola,
Hola,
hello.
Aimé. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We're thrilled to have Nicole here today to discuss her work, and thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Aimé. It's good to see you again.
Yes, absolutely. We miss you in New York, but so I was telling the audience that you are originally from Peru and that you're living in Lima now. Is that right? And that you lived in New York for many years also. I don't know if you want to tell them a little bit about your geographical detour
Oh, yeah.
or return, we should say.
Well, the idea was to be between Lima and New York. And, well, the pandemic, like the sanitary crisis hasn't helped. But
Yeah,
hopefully we'll be back soon. And, yeah, well, I studied visual arts here in Peru, and then I did a postgrad, which in Belgium at the HISC, which is a scholarship for 12 artists from around the world. So this was 2 years. And well, I also lived in Rome, then in New York, and yeah, been hopping around a lot.
nice.
But I
And now you're
think
in Lima.
Belgium, yeah, New York was wonderful and was really mind-blowing. My mother grew up there, so I have a lot of relationship with New York. But in terms of impact in my work, definitely New York, but also Belgium was an experience that informed my work in ways I wouldn't have imagined.
Nice.
Yeah, and like I'm gonna talk about this throughout the conversation. Yeah.
So why don't we go to the work and chat a little bit about what you've been doing lately?
Well, I just showed at Canary Islands in January, which is one of the last slideshows we have there.
We'll go to that in a minute. Let's go chronologically, but yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting because we was like in the midst of the pandemic, and I was supposed to travel there, but 1 week before they closed all the connections. So
Oh gosh.
I got stranded and had to send all the indications and all this back and forth. I mean, it was interesting. It was interesting, but yeah, I'm definitely going sometime to visit Canary Island, where my family is from, actually.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
it was funny because, just a little bit of biography also. It was family. It was, some of my relatives I didn't know, and they start sending all these newspapers and all these press release and, hey, Nicole,
Nice.
you're here. And so it was pretty interesting to reconnect with my family from Canary Islands, or connect for the first time, through this. So it was a lot of excitement for the family.
That's
As
amazing.
well as me, of course.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this piece that we're seeing right now.
Yeah. The big piece is the start of a series called Black Bazaar, which I did for a show at Mana Contemporary. It's the size is like 4 meters by 450. It was crazy. I was like sitting on top of this collage, like a lot of corporeal effort, like on trying to get this done, like for 12 days. And so the thematic of the show, like the name of the show was called Theorem. And the thematic, after, after Pasolini's film. This was curated by Octavio Saya. And the interesting thing about this film is that there's this character, a female character, that enters the lives of a family, and she starts to have weird inherence in each and every one of the family members. So like the prerogative was to think of something or someone that could make like a splash or an impact. At that time, I had my studio near Jefferson Station, I remember, and I was obsessively thinking of this idea of the rift, of this aperture that would, separate two different spaces, or a space in two parts. And my process has a lot to do with it's anchored in appropriation, and has a lot to do with visualizing and acquiring photos from, like postcard photos, or, getting images from encyclopedias or texts from text-based or material related to systems of knowledge. So, like the process starts really, like now I have a big body of, like a big collection that, luckily, because, like I usually go to flea markets and libraries, and of course there's a lot of things online, but it's not the same, like I'm still, like very, very fond of the paper and the materiality of the books. So I started to realize I was.
So tell us a little bit. Let me interrupt you before you go into the conceptual reasons. I think it would be interesting if you share with the audience what is the process, what material process you do with this research that you do with these images and these texts. Like, how do you collage them? Is it digital? Do you work first on paper?
Well, it definitely started like as a very simple process, and that was while I was in Belgium. I usually did my photographs around Lima and Peru in general, and then scan them and start doing like this photo montage. But in Belgium, I realized that I was more interested on looking back on the images that were out there than in doing my own, because it dawned on me that, I was a female artist from Latin America, and I, as a reckoning process of who I was, where I was standing, and the like my agency or possible agency as being a Latin American artist in this context, I started to go back and started to look at the sort of scaffolding of visual and narrative images and structure that has been built from Western and the Western gaze and systems of knowledge in a way.
Let's take this one as an example. I don't know if you want to describe, because I know maybe there are people that haven't seen your work before, and I know that Instagram is a small medium and they might be in their phones. Maybe you can describe a little bit what's going on here in this composition, for example.
Yes, this is a Black Vassar tool, so it's part of the series of the image, the central image on the first plate, and it was the idea was to have a central object that would somehow make people, I'll graphic it as a very corporeal thing. It's like when you shift your weight from one foot to the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit like that, like that you see a sort of peaceful landscape,
Mm-hmm.
but then you start realizing there's something lurking or something static, but that could fall or could make an impact on the scenery at
Mm-hmm.
any time, at any point.
So if we go back to the previous slide for 1 second, let's describe it like more like I want to do one like step by step. So what we see here, for those of you who cannot see it very clearly, this is a scene of a beach, and there is like a house. There's two intersected buildings, basically. There is yeah, a series of buildings that is horizontally, and then one that is like crossing it, right?
Yeah, like
Um,
more sort of modernist architecture, and
mhm,
then there's this black splash that is
mhm,
an excerpt of a drawing that I've incorporated on the collage.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah,
And this is all in a very tropical landscape. It even looks like if it was not, I don't know, a Copacabana,
yeah,
or
yeah,
Leblon in Rio de Janeiro.
yeah.
And
It's Brazil.
what are you trying to comment on with this, like this tension in between this very like beautiful, idyllic, holiday landscape and these modernist buildings?
Well, in a way, I mean, my work is very layered, and there's a lot of interest that sort of circle back,
Mm-hmm,
and the idea of somehow failure of modernity in a way,
mm-hmm,
it's been commented there, but
mm-hmm,
at the same time, it's the logic I use on all of my collages of trying to learn every image in my archive, and
mm-hmm,
start cutting piece by piece
mm-hmm,
and memorize it, and slowly but surely I start to, like, my hands are like a little bit like magically like reaching out for like the perfect piece, because I've developed this in a way like that my memory is like I lose a little tiny bit of a staircase, for example, or a piece of rock, and I would know this is missing, right?
mm-hmm,
So slowly but surely, I would reinstate all these little bits and pieces of these different places on a whole new panorama.
mm-hmm.
That's apparently one landscape, but it's like a very fragmented and multi-layered collage, no?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, so there is, so these little squares are like this is where I started to work with an anthropological material.
Mm-hmm.
This specific one is called, it's a German anthropological encyclopedia. And it's
Mm-hmm.
called Die Große Wolkenkunde, which is from 1936.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, like people from different countries and different towns are depicted on their daily, their
Mm-hmm.
daily routines.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where I start to incorporate the idea of people
Mm-hmm.
and characters in my work, because previously it was basically landscape. So the squares over there, it's like
Yeah.
like the shoulder, like the pattern of the shoulder of a woman from Uganda, actually.
Oh, wow.
And
Like from that closing.
yes, and there in the center is like a ruin, which is again the same dynamic of something that is holding there, but is at any minute could fall or do
Any
something.
minute.
And then this really peaceful, you know, Asian landscape, like super antique landscape, no? The fact that I do this in black and white is to democratize the images I use and to sort of collapse the idea of time, because if you have a black and white, like, you know, collage, all those fragments, because you know, like where you see a postcard, you get the hues are from the 60s or from like the 20s. So you know, like you put it in black and white and you democratize, you know, like the whole thing.
Absolutely, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next one. I think this is, you know, this is an important one for people to get a sense of the scale of these works, right? And also the
Yeah.
way that you install them, which I think is very interesting. I mean, they're like huge and they're like, you know,
Yeah, these are canvas collages, and what I usually, well, they're like, you know, like stapled around a wooden frame, you know, like a wooden piece of, you know, like a long piece of wood, and they're like hanged very simple from the wall. So they would just hang there. And
and
it's
you
like,
only use one plank on top.
yeah, just that. And it kind of makes me think of these backdrops that photographers used to
Yeah.
make, to elaborate on these European landscapes, you know, like, I don't know, Chambi or Couret or all these famous photographers.
Yes. Or also with tropical landscapes. I mean, people would go and dress up and pretend that they were on holiday.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
let's go to the next one.
Okay, so this is also part of the theorem project. And this is, again, a very peaceful kind of cave in a tropical situation. But the image that you see on the plexiglass, it's an image that is cropped with the drawing that I did. So the drawing is kind of a blast. And this blast drawing is cropping the image. So you can see tiny fragments, and you can see like a see-through. But you can definitely notice some of the content of the image, which is a hacienda with the people that work there and the landowners.
And something that is very interesting also is how in the composition you're following the same arch of the cave, right? Like the arc of the cave is like superimposing. So it's very interesting in that regard how you work with the idea of the superimposition.
Yes, the superimposition and also the continuation. So back to when I was explaining you at the beginning, it really started as a very simple equation. You know, me going to the flea markets, getting these old postcards, and doing this simple cataloging method. I remember I would sit in my studio in Ghent, and I would display all the postcards and start playing this idea of memory play, and catalog them in different, you know, invented ways. So in that equation and in that repetition of a supposedly cataloging method, I was memorizing the image. So slowly but surely, I could put two images together, and the vantage point of one would make an extension for the other, and it looked like exactly, you know, like it looked like perfectly seamless image.
I think it's very interesting also that work with the idea of the archive, right? And your relationship to the archive and how you are not just relating it in conceptual terms, which is what we usually do. People who do research in archives are usually trying to find links that are thematic, historical, cause consequence, that type of relationship in between the elements. And in your case, it's also a formalistic relation that you're forcing upon different sources of images, different themes. And I think that's very interesting that it adds a new way to think about the connection in between things.
Yes, in between things, and also, you know, after some years, I started to include text also.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to translate this very personal way of joining and or I call it associative landscapes or yeah, associative political geographies or associative landscapes.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So this one is called Ocaso,
Mm-hmm.
and it's again, it's, you know, like I did a whole collage again, you know, like associating different places, but here there's a lot more content, excerpts from this German anthropological atlas.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if people can see there, but there's a lot of characters, or, you know, like bits and pieces of not the characters, but, you know, their skirts or their tattoos or their hair pieces that weave into the landscape. So in a way, it's something that, you know, stayed with me, this idea that people of, you know, like there was this idea of exoticization, you know, of different communities through the landscape, and the people itself were relegated to all this paraphernalia, you know, related to their communities and their bodies, their tattoos, the you know, like the hair pieces and the dress and the dresses that they were using. So I started slowly but surely weaving these bits and pieces from the section related to South America to this collage, no? So there's this, you know, like it's like a 5 rows of transparent prints that you can walk through. So, you know, more and more I've tried to put the, you know, like the like the audience, you know, inside the work, so they have one-on-one relationship with the work.
Absolutely.
And this idea of kind of trying to figure out what they're confronted with and what they make amends, you know, with what their history is, what they bring with them, and what the work says, no, or gives. No?
Absolutely.
So this was called Ocaso, and I'll read you this because it's pretty awesome. It's a passage of Levi-Strauss' Tristes Trópicos, or Tristes Tropiques. I don't know how it's in English, but so he states that sunset is quite sorry, just a second. So dawn is no guarantee of the nature of the rest of the day. It starts the meteorological process and declares it is going to rain, it is going to be fine. Sunset is quite a different matter. it is a complete performance with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the spectacle offers a sort of small-scale image of the battles, triumphs, and defeats which have succeeded each other during 12 hours in tangible form, but also at a slower speed. So in a way, you know, like there's phrases, words that also trigger the work, you know. So this was a little bit, you know, like a trigger for Ocaso, no?
Okay, let's see the next one.
Okay, this is called partial connection, black and white. And you can see there's like an image of like a kind of it's not a city, but it's like a it has architecture.
Yes, and it has some buildings. It's almost like the archway of a typical American plaza, where it has like, you know,
it's sort of a plaza, and then there's this landscape, but it's pretty much related to some you know these areas where you would see crops, you know? So and the idea of partial connections, I guess it, you know, like there's some words that take a lot longer time for me to realize what they are, but I guess looking at it in a way, it makes me think of this ongoing rift related to these social differences here in Peru, you know, that prevail between the interior of the country and the city, you know?
Which is something that is present, this tension that we saw in the previous image also between the landscape, the natural landscape, and this idea of modernization, right?
Yes, I think it's there's a lot of these ideas in a way, but going back to for example vertical horizons, there was a lot of content related to color, and some of the texts I got them from the Britannic Encyclopedia, and actually there were scientific texts that in a way, since I was trying to translate this method of working as a collage or thinking, because it's a way of thinking, no? I would, you know, like cross out part of, you know, like part of the phrase and leave, I mean, you could see through and understand what was said there. But I got, you know, like going back to the encyclopedia and reading the text, because it really is very interesting, the kind of language and the terminology that is used. So there were some terminology that was pretty impressive and more upfront, but there was other, like the scientific ones, that were kind of it gave you a lot of liberty to work with. So one of them is this this that I did for the audio, that is let me read it. I have so many things open that oh, okay, here it is. So one of it is, or partly one of it is, open your mouth and collect rainwater. The striking color varies from yellow, green to dark green and blue. So this was one of the part of one of the texts, and the other was the description of the moire, which is the conjunction or the coexistence between the white and the black. So that was present on the transparent pieces that were printed see-through. So, you know, this was 2016, and I had lived in New York for some time, and I think this violence with Black and brown bodies was very pervasive and definitely got into my psyche, you know, because then I really realized that there were a lot of texts related to color. And there was definitely, you know, this idea of power structures, the you know, like the title of the show in itself, it's an oxymoron, which is vertical horizons, no? But it definitely alludes and, you know, makes you think of this verticality of power structure.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next image because I think I want to make sure that we get to see a little bit of the different medias that you use.
Sure. So this series is called Studies of Color in Motion. And this was a part of a research I did at the New York Public Library. I was fascinated by the accounts and the different entries of Humboldt related to the comparisons, again the color, of the different hues of blues of the skies and the seas from the start of his travels, you know, from Spain, passing through Africa and going down to the south, to South America.
Why don't we go to the next image where I'm seeing that we will see a little bit of more detail.
Sure, sure.
Maybe Natalia, you can zoom in a little bit so we see one of the inscriptions and Nicole can explain it.
Yeah, so he used the cyanotype from Saussure, which is this circular, very rudimentary chart, color chart that goes from Prussia or black to white. So it goes through all the hues of blue. So he started giving these entries and these comparisons, talking about also about science, no? But doing all these comparisons from the hues of the skies and the waters. Also, that was quite interesting to just, you know, read those entries. And yeah, I worked the images with like in a cyanotype or with the chart itself. No?
Let's go see the next one. That will be more clear.
Yeah, that's the whole degradation. Yeah.
I think it's also very interesting, the tension with the type of materials that you use to display these images. In this case, it's a very thin fabric. It looks almost like silk. I don't know what it was. And the effect that produces, right, with regards to the type of material, like is the kind of like the photograph that we just saw or a chart, you know, is the type of material that we're used to seeing, very solid, right? And the choice of the fabric in very solid cardboard or paper, you know, or you know, or even a poster, and like I can imagine like seeing this piece live, like the little movements of the fabric would also add a layer to it, right?
Yes, and I was also, you know, like my challenge is also formally to stem from photography, but go beyond, you know, immerse the audience in the work, but also go beyond the bidimensionality, you know, like I love working and experimenting with different materials. This was like a raw polyester, and so the image is printed, and then ironed on top of the cloth, so all the ink goes to the cloth. But it has like this, again, the idea of backdrop or something that is hanging there, you know, lightly.
Let's see the next one where that becomes very, very clear. The next one and then one after. Let's go to
Yes.
here. It's very clear.
Okay, this work, I'm very fond of this one, and it's pretty funny. So okay, the image is they're like Witoto warriors, which are like people from the Amazon area, you know, like from the jungle. And so I found this text on a medical compilation that it's called Curare. That is like a history of nature and clinical use for this curare, which is a poison that is extracted from the bark or the branches of some trees, and it's used on the tip of the arrow. They're used to, you know, like to fish or to, you know, kill, I guess. And I think it's used until today. So the story goes that Humboldt was, you know, he found this shaman, and this shaman was, you know, like boiling this material and this curare, no? And so he starts talking with the shaman. And I'll read the text. Let me go back to. So, because one finds very few accounts on the other side, I guess. You know, like I don't like the word other, but you know, like it's very seldom that you find the voice of someone like a shaman on these kind of texts. So I know, said he, the shaman, that the whites have the secret for making soap and this black powder, which if one misses, has the fault of making a loud noise which scares away the animal. Curare, which we prepare, is far superior to that which you make over there beyond the seas. It is a juice of a plant which kills quietly without one knowing whence the blow came. So, partly funny, partly not so funny, but yeah, that definitely triggered that installation. Yeah, which is called Amo del Curare, which is like how would you say it? The protector of the curare, the poison or something like that. Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's really fascinating. Let's see the next one where people can see the detail.
And there at the side, you have like the different ways that they spell curare, no?
Curare, urari, aurari, urali, urare. Yeah, it's really interesting. So let's see the next project, because I want to make sure that we get to see a few more. Can we see the next slide?
Okay, so this is Vacío Tropical, or you would translate it as tropical void or something. So this is all the selection of the segment of South American characters on the German ethnographical atlas.
And let's see the next slide where people can see the detail of one of them. It's really striking.
Sure. So this is from Ona Tribe, which is in Argentina at the south. And so what I did was, again, this idea of the characters, you know, like being disguised or being forefronted by the landscape. So I decided to leave the features of the characters out and just draw, like on hand, draw all of the tattoos, the face coverings, the hair pieces, all the accessories, the dressing, everything. And I, you know, laser cut with the drawing, you know, like I laser cut them on top of postcards on different scenarios.
And the text that appears behind? Sorry.
Yes, behind there are actual encyclopedic pages
That describe them.
And so, for example, one describes the relationship with, it's kind of like the relationship with, I don't know, Europe and South America, or not to say that the colonial word, no? Or political geography, which I took from one of these terminologies in the Britannic Encyclopedia, no? So that, you know, like the elaboration and the, you know, shifts and the trickiness of the language I was really taken by it. So I just tore the encyclopedia and selected some of the
That's amazing.
And it felt very, very you know, liberating, because, you know, I studied with the encyclopedia.
Of course.
Not to give up my age, I don't care, but
we all did.
So it was quite liberating, because I also went to this British all-girls school, you know, private school. So it was quite liberating to be able to just tear the page
apart.
Like, yes, I'm doing this.
I feel it's such a generational gap. I grew up studying the encyclopedias also. I mean, there's few people left that is like pre-Wikipedia. I mean, I guess there's a bunch of us, but at the same time, it's such a conceptual difference. I mean, the growing up before the internet. I mean, there was internet when we were young. It's just that there was not the internet that we know today, and Wikipedia was not a thing, and Google didn't exist. Searching was, you know, very specific. And I feel like it's such a, I don't know, such a different world, and it was beautiful to peruse through the encyclopedia.
It was wonderful. Yeah, it was really wonderful. But at the same time, you know, you go back and you say, oh shit, is this right? I mean, this is not right.
Nobody questioned the sources. I mean, there was not access to many sources to contrast them. The encyclopedia in my house became a piece of furniture, basically, like holding a TV. So anyway, let's go to the next one.
Sure.
Yes.
So
this is a strange fruit. I don't know if you want to say.
Yeah, again, the anthropological encyclopedia. So I, you know, laser cut the material that is hanging with maps and location maps from, you know, like different communities in South America, comparisons. There were like charts related that would give measurements of the heads of different communities. There was a lot of content there. The piece at the right, I should have put that one. Anyhow, the piece at the right, I don't know if it's there. It's again, you know, like these crop outs, very, very much similar to Vacío Tropical. And the piece at the left is a collage done with some mannequins. Some mannequins at the Anthropological Museum in Paris. So you can see them at the storage, and they're like, you know, again,
we can go, let's go 3 images up and we'll be able to see a close-up.
Yeah, that's the one.
One more, that one.
Yeah, so you can
maybe you can zoom in, Natalia. By zooming in, you can zoom in like with your fingers instead of moving the phone if you prefer. Perfect.
Okay, so there you can see this. You can definitely see that there's mannequins more like with Asian characteristics or features,
Phenotypes,
or colored people or white, you know, and
they're organized that way in the storage.
They're there in the storage, right? I think I found it at the Documents magazine, I think. Well, anyhow, and with that image, there's these arrows, which is a cataloging system of arrows from the jungle of Peru. And that was part of the collection of a British collector that used to travel all over the world. And actually his collection is in several, you know, like after he died, the collection went to several museums in England. So, so it was confronted with this cataloging system of arrows.
I love how you also left the cutting board as a backdrop. I think it's very interesting because it also is like making your process transparent to, you know, the audience.
Yeah, there's this little studio things that say like, okay, why not? Looks good.
I love it. Yeah, no, I love it. Let's see the next one where people can see the detail of the hanging pieces. These are so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, those are the, the one at the right is like the cranial, ¿cómo se dice? I don't know how it's said in English, but it's like the measurements of the skull.
Skull, yeah.
Yeah, different communities. And the center is the location of different communities in South America and the names of the communities. No?
And that is what is cut in laser into the fabric, right?
Yes.
Into the leather. This is leather.
Into the leather. So it's all, you know, hand drawn by me and then vectorized and cut.
And the ceramic piece, what is the source of the ceramic piece that you reproduce?
It's just, you know, like ironic piece, you know, like everything tropical has to have a pineapple in it, or I don't know, like a palm tree, right? So it's a little bit of irony there. And so by the way, the process is super intimate, and but it has definitely changed throughout time, no? A lot of
Let's see the next one.
A lot of things that happen on top of the table, and well, now there's a lot that is digital.
Yeah, I thought it was a good transition in that regard because we saw all these pieces that are very like, you know, like handcraft, and then you started doing a lot of digital also.
Yes.
Let's comment on this one.
This was an invitation by Barbara Thun to develop a project for new viewings, which I think it's launching at the end of this month, maybe next week. So this was last year, and I was obsessively collecting images of interiors of museums related to all the settings of, you know, like pre-Columbian material, no? And let me go back to this phrase. I have my notes. Okay.
Let's see the next one maybe, because I want to make sure Instagram is gonna cut us off in something like 7 minutes, and I want to make sure that we see the next one
Can
also.
we go to the next one?
Yes.
Yeah, this is good. Okay, so while I was researching at the New York Public Library on all these, I had this fantasy that I could get these plates of this American museum with this pre-Columbian content and their displays. So I found the catalog of Annie and Joseph Albers, and so it's like the Peabody Museum has the collection now, but so there was this catalog. I think they only released it in 2016 or 17. So there's a part where Annie says, "It's strange that primitive, so-called methods are so very complicated." So, you know, like that lingered in my head, definitely. And so that's the name. Well, I varied it a little bit, but that's sort of the name of this series that I present new viewings, no? And the content is, of course, there's like some material I introduce and I repeat. So you can see the arrows there, but you can see also, because Joseph Albers, of course, both of them were doing this fabulous collection of pre-Columbian art. And Joseph was working, he was teaching, I think he was the director at the Black Mountain College, right? So back at between the 50s and 60s. And so the alumni of the Black Mountain College were investigating on this idea of pre-Columbian textiles. And they were doing like using these waste looms themselves to, you know, like weave and investigate on this amazing methods that we use and the people in the Andes use from different South American countries. So there's a lot of you see the leg of this woman with the loom. So yeah, I mixed all this content, no, the Black Mountain College, the arrows, etc., etc. Yeah,
I think it's interesting because in a way you reverse the probably well mentored but still colonialistic view of this modernist trying to look to the Andes, and in a way you go from, I mean, you know, even if you might come from a European heritage, you're coming from the Andes perspective to look into the Black Mountain College. So it's very ironic in that regard. Also, the piece I think is very interesting.
I think the sense of humor is like Mike Kelly said, like it's sort of like the bread and butter, you know. For me, it definitely triggers the. It really does the trick for me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have a few more minutes. Let's see if anybody has any question. But meanwhile, if you have any question, please put it now in the comments. I will read it. But meanwhile, maybe you can comment on these last two images. Natalia, maybe you can go to the previous one for
Sure. This was what the project I presented for Canary Islands. It's called The Shape of Things, and it goes back to a very personal memory, which was like a recurring, I don't know if it's a dream or a nightmare, but it was this kind of a dream that I saw a big mass, like a material, a mass that would block the vision, my vision. So slowly would block my vision. And it was very recurring when I was growing up. And after this invitation, I started to go through my archives. And these images are from the NASA. So and I had them printed, and then they were like lying there in my studio since 2015, I think. And I went back to them and I thought, okay, this really has to do with the moment and this feeling, the sensation that there's something blocking, or that there's something so big and so uh, like
Overwhelming, something overwhelming.
overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of a comment on the current situation,
Mm-hmm.
taking these images that have absolutely no relation to, it's like a cosmogony, no? And they have no relation to people whatsoever, no? We're not stated there, we're not present. There's this
Absolutely.
grainy material and texture, and you can navigate. It's like this 3-axis piece, and you can really navigate, enter, and you can see through and get these different layers of images. There's
And it involves
also,
the body of the spectator in a way that your fabrics also did, but I think it's very striking in this regard how it's a barrier. I think it's very interesting.
yeah, and there's like sound, also some sound graphics, and like a lightning bolt, and there's all sorts of
it's a beautiful piece, and I hope that people get a chance to see it despite the pandemic.
yeah, hopefully.
So, Nicole, I want to make sure that we say goodbye properly before Instagram cuts us off. They're very strict about their hour. Sometimes you
Sure.
get a few extra minutes, but I want to make sure of thanking you for sharing all this work. It's really beautiful, and it's really also very deep and very smart. And we're thrilled to have shared it to the audience. But thank you so much for accepting this invitation and for being part of it.
Thank you for having me, Aimé. Thank you to all the team, Alessandra and Natalia, and all the people that accompanied us.
And I hope we can see you in New York soon.
Yes, absolutely.